Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we will be looking at new superships. Well, we'll start with one, and obviously, given that there's a German supership, that's the one I was going to look at first. What did you expect? This is the Hannover. I actually grew up near Hannover, which is the capital of Lower Saxony, so a double whammy here for that. This is a hypothetical Super H-class sort of ship with everything hypothetical, so we don't even need to look much closer. But this is the German Tier 11 ship. I am going to keep calling them Tier 11 simply because, that's pretty much what they are. So the obvious comparison will have to be with the Großer Kurfürst, with the existing Tier 10 battleship, and see how the progression goes from there. The Hannover has a very different layout. If you're not familiar with German battleships, a very, very brief version, at least the battleship line, not the battlecruiser line, not the Schlieffen, but the battleship line, very, very good secondaries, pretty good main guns, lots of armor. That's what these things are. So while the Großer Kurfürst in traditional German battleship line has the secondary overload and the sonar, the Hannover does get the sonar, but not the secondary specialization. In fact, she gets a spotter plane, which is something that we're normally more seeing with the Italians. But that gives us 20% extra gun range. This is a Scout Plane 3, and it gets a combat instruction. So once you hit 20 times with main guns, you basically get a secondary overload. So, and a pretty good one at that. 25% reload and 35% range for 15 seconds. If you have been looking very closely at the screen, you may have seen that this talks about auto secondaries, and there's a good reason for that. We'll get to that in a minute, however. So the monster that is the Hannover has a ludicrous amount of hit points with 70,000. And is even more heavily armored than the Großer Kurfürst. Now, we cannot directly infer the thickness of the armor from the stats that we're seeing here. So the damage reduction stat just tells us how much damage is shaved off the alpha of any incoming shell. It doesn't tell us if the shell is actually going to penetrate or not, because that depends on the thickness of armor at the point of impact, and we don't actually know these stats. We know they exist, but we don't know what they exactly are. I'm going to have to take a look at CIC later and see if they have anything, but if the Großer Kurfürst is any indication, thick deck generally, and relatively hard to citadel these things. Also a 20% torpedo damage reduction is pretty neat. And funnily enough, that monstrosity is more maneuverable than the GK, because of course she is. The guns is where it gets funny. We have 483 millimeter guns. Very weird caliber. Haven't seen that one around before, I think. And she does get a slower base reload, only 22 seconds, and a shorter range. But obviously these are large caliber guns. She does get a huge amount of damage out of them. However, we are losing the 150s. The manual secondaries, so no 150 millimeter armor piercing against enemy destroyers, which is again quite unusual for German battleships, but they're gone. In return, we get more of the auto secondaries. We get six twin turrets extra. They have a faster base reload, and they do a bit more damage. But yeah, the 150s are not there. And that explains why the combat instruction only refers to auto secondaries, because the ship literally doesn't have any manual secondaries. The AA is surprisingly good, actually, and the concealment is better than on the Großer Kurfürst. So what do we have then? Is that a sort of linear progression that we have? If I can actually now find the ship, because I have to change the filter. There we go. Hannover, there she is. Is this a linear progression? Not quite. This isn't quite the same ship. as your typical German battleship, simply because you don't have the manual secondaries. In return, you get sort of I would almost say an easier to play version. It is a ship that relies pretty heavily on the main guns because that's how you get the secondary overload. In return, the ludicrous amount of auto secondaries, and these auto secondaries are really, really good, plus the actual combat instruction make this actually relatively easy to play. However, before we get to that, let's look through the details. We've talked about the skills already. You actually get the choice here with, and this is quite unusual, you get the choice between the improved main armor belt, which nobody usually takes, because it's normally that you go for a secondary build where you use the German module, the German special module in slot 1 for boosting your secondaries, and then you go for the secondary reload. You can do this here, but you're kind of wasting half of the elite bonus because you don't actually have a secondary battery. You only have the auto secondaries. Now, getting 10% off base reload isn't bad on these, but you can also, I think at this point, you can potentially also take the improved main armor belt simply because the ship has such ludicrous high armor values to begin with. Either of them is fine, I think. It just kind of felt weird not to actually have any manual secondaries to boost with this. Which brings us to the choice for the first equipment slot. Now, I've tried both. I have tried the main battery mod 3, and yes, these guns are relatively inaccurate, as you are used to, and you don't get the precise aiming on these. So that is not a bad choice. The other alternative that you can take, and that I ended up in the end probably going to be using for myself, is the auxiliary armament modification. Not something you're seeing being used very often, but this actually improves the auto secondary range, and it improves the AA range. And given that the ship actually has reasonably decent AA, and it is a very large target, and if there's carriers in play, they are probably going to go for it, and that means having a bit extra range on the AA is not actually a terrible thing. Now, again, I think it's the same like with the elite bonus. It's either of these two. Other than that, propulsion mod, and you probably do want concealment, simply because concealment is just so much more important these days. So that's your new standard setup. Now I'm just going to be using the standard camouflage here, but you have a choice if you're so inclined to spend money on things between two permacamos. You can get the historical, which is actually not bad. I generally complain about torpedo damage reduction, but yeah, it's not hugely useful. Although if you are playing aggressively and you just want to shrug off the torpedoes, it's nice to have. Not as nice as on something that has huge base torpedo damage reduction, but still. The main battery range and dispersion is much appreciated. So if you're playing with this, then having the precision module in slot 1 is maybe not a terrible choice. Alternatively, you can get the I have to zoom out a bit here. The ship is so big you can't even actually properly zoom out to see the front of it. We can kind of, yeah, it's got a honking big bird on the nose, which forgoes the extra hit points, but in return you get auto secondary firing range. So that would be a nice combination with the range module that I put in earlier. So I think all in all, both are good camos. It really comes down to the question of, do you actually want to spend money on this? And especially that it's a temporary ship, so you can only play it during the event and only when it's actually active. So I leave that up to everybody. It is there, and yeah, we're not going to use it during testing. For a commander, you can probably sort of use a German commander. I've put a fully upgraded commander in, but not a legendary one, because not everybody has those. And on German commanders, I actually tend to use the armament repair expert, simply because you have so many secondaries that getting them back online more quickly is not a bad thing to have. Other than that, there's no big surprise here. I would still recommend using the close quarters combat expert for the dispersion on the auto secondaries. And obvious choices are the APCS, because these main guns, they hit really, really hard. And despite that fact, having the secondary talent in 13 is not a bad choice, because once you receive damage 30% to your total HP, which is relatively easy if you're in a German battleship and you play aggressively, it actually improves your auto secondaries quite a bit. So having that is a good one. And then it's really up to your choice where you're going from there. However, all in all, this is not completely foreign to how you play German battleships. You still have to kind of decide where and when to push and where and when to be aggressive. You don't want to rush out early on, and it's the same with the großer Kurfürst. If you just rush out on ahead, you get focused down. People get often misled into thinking that due to the amount of armor that these ships are, well, impervious or impenetrable. They're not. They burn just like everything else, and they just take torpedoes like everything else. I just personally find that in this particular ship, it's a bit easier to play German battleship if you know what you're doing than even in something like the großer Kurfürst. But let's actually see that in action, shall we? We are playing on everybody's favorite map, the LSD map, Colorful Islands. At least they fixed their island hitboxes relatively recently. And we are the only super ship in the game. I think I've seen a message on the dev channel that they were going to fix the matchmaking, but yeah, well, slow clap. It's hard to get these things right, isn't it? Like building in rules that there should be at least a single super ship on, or an equal number of super ships on each team. On each. That includes the opposing team. Oh well. We are facing a Mecklenburg, a Lion, a Black Zau, one that isn't, an Encounter, a Udeloy, and a Grozovoi. And a Domination. So a well-rounded teams, I'd say, all in all, except for the fact, or the obvious fact, that I have a T11. We have a T11, and they don't. just you can't make this up. But yeah, other than that, how do you play this ship? Well, like I said earlier on, you don't want to rush in. The first thing you really want to do is ensure that if you're going aggressive, you have your secondary overload charged. So not secondary overload, combat instruction, which serves as a proxy. So you want to kind of hang back and get your 30 hits in before you go aggressive. And this is, I feel like, a really good guideline, because this is something you should be doing on the regular German battleships as well. You shouldn't just be blindly rushing into the enemy team and getting yourself killed in a crossfire. But everything's available and the game doesn't tell you to. So kind of use that as a hint, as a marker. Have your combat instruction up before you go push in. So I am going to shift over towards Seacap, because there is a Smolensk and a friendly destroyer. And hopefully the friendly destroyer will eventually join the game. I can't even blame people for being AFK anymore, given the general stability issues. So we're going to sail over here and see if, and I am detected, so there is an enemy destroyer over here. And yeah, Smolensk it's a Smolensk. You're not going to be expecting it to actually shoot at destroyers. So that's going to be a me problem. There's a Zau, and Zau probably has torpedoes away, so let's make our way out of here. And there's the Grozovoi. Grozovoi is smoking up, and first couple of hits landed on the Zau. There come the Zau torpedoes. So Grozovoi has not launched yet, so I'm gonna try and turn, but I'm a lot too close. So I think we may as well just take the Grozovoi torpedoes. At least it's just the Grozovoi. The problem, obviously, is that the Grozovoi is within hydro range. So, yeah, he's in all kinds of trouble. And this friendly Somers is actually there, and he is helping out. So after taking a few Grozovoi torpedoes, yes, it's fine. But we have dished out as well as we've gotten, and the Zau is already almost down. And the Grozovoi is still. The Grozovoi has taken a lot of damage as well and is retreating. So let's see if we can finish the Zau off. And then, no, never mind, Smolensk has taken him out. Yes, please try to hit the Grozovoi. That would be nice, but you know, it's a Smolensk. It'll only start attacking destroyers if it doesn't have anything else to farm fire damage on. And I'm pretty sure that Lion is still in Smolensk range. But anyway, the Grozovoi is on low enough hit points that we can push in here, especially that I now got a Somers with me. And I've got the spotter plane up, not for the range, just for a better angle on the Lion, and yeah, that hurt. There's the Grozovoi. I'm not afraid of that thing. Auto secondaries can finish it off if the Somers doesn't get it. Sonar is still on cooldown, but I've got Lion to shoot at. And yeah, Grozovoi has Somers issues, so let's just... and there's Mecklenburg over there. There we go, that's what we want to see, another Citadel. And now my, Lion obviously firing high explosive at me. Now my combat instruction is active, but I'm not yet going to use it because the Lion is well out of range. And I haven't been paying attention, but I think somebody might have finished off the Grozovoi. So let's get some shots out at the encounter. Then we'll heal up once more and getting the sonar up just in case there's still torpedoes in the water somewhere. And there is the Mecklenburg, which is firing high explosive at me for some obscure reason. I mean, okay, fair enough. My damage control is on cooldown, but still. Well, let's see what we can do against the Mecklenburg. It is a German battleship, so it's not going to be super trivial to. Citadel that thing. He is going to have torpedoes away, however. So I am assuming that that's the case. He is now coming under fire from the Smolensk as well, and this is the good time to use the combat instructions and basically use the secondary overload and just absolutely shred the Mecklenburg. Yep, there come the torpedoes. This is fine. I've still got 30,000 hit points, and Mecklenburg is going to be down before he actually gets to the ground. Now he was banking for permaflood and permafires. So, which is not a terrible idea, but under the concentrated fire of this ludicrous thing, it feels like you've got a Schlieffenstrap to your side. I mean, look at the sheer rate and amount of fire that comes out of these auto secondaries on the Hannover, even without the combat instructions. So another fire from the Mecklenburg, damage controlling that. Here come the torpedoes on the other side. Damacon is still active. Going to take another hit. That's fine. We've got another heal. And we have... I think we still have an encounter to shoot at. I think we've seen the Zao, so this should be the encounter. It does not look like a Zao. Let's see if we can make ourselves useful at 15 kilometers range. And it gives you a bit of an indication. Yes, that's when dispersion happens. It gives you a bit of an indication what you can do with the range extension. It is good if you're firing at stationary broadside on battleships at long ranges, but trying to hit a maneuvering cruiser with the spotter plane up with the dispersion of these guns, as you can see, is relatively not an awful lot is going to happen, let's put it that way. So all in all, Hannover, is this a good ship? Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's an easier to play Große Kurfürst. You've got a larger hit point pool. You've got more armor. You don't have to learn how to secondary. You kind of incentivize to use your main guns in the beginning to charge up your combat instruction for the secondary overload before you push in anywhere. She is a little bit more vulnerable to destroyers. So if you are getting chased by anything that's Japanese or Pan-Asian, then you might be in a bit more trouble simply because you can't really use the manual secondaries, which is what makes the Große Kurfürst, for example, so dangerous against destroyers. However, it is. If you're not rushing head first in, but actually play with your team, then as a damage sponge and something which is a role that these ships can play, then you can easily rack up the damage in these ships, even if you don't want to push. And I know that figuring out when to be aggressive in a German battleship is always the most difficult part for people. Even if you don't want to and you just want to stay, you say, okay, I don't feel comfortable, I don't have the confidence to be aggressive. At range, she can have a massive range with the spotter plane up. Just make sure you're not targeting on anything that's actually moving, but at something like enemy battleships at long range. The guns really hurt, the main guns, and you can do a really fair amount of damage with the main guns, even if you're feeling like you don't feel like taking point, but you'd rather stay with a team, which is workable in the ship as well. So it's quite flexible in that regard. The damage potential is good for a tier 11, and I think overall it's a good and fun ship to play. I find it personally relatively easy to play, and yeah, there's that. So if you are liking German battleships, then that I think might be a good choice for you if you want to have some fun in tier 11. Just as usual, before you spend money, be aware that these things are seasonal and you don't actually own them, and you have to spend resources you're basically renting the ship. You have to spend resources to actually play it. So there's that. Anyway, that's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.